Very much.
We have it on good authority from somebody who brought that fairies made some grasshopper bars and brought them tonight. It's nice that people bring treats and things to share. That generosity is appreciated by others. It's part of what makes for a welcoming environment. And I'm thinking about this in part because and I was just talking to Bob about it, and I've talked to Jeff and Belinda about this a little bit. As we move to our new home, the things that we've done to foster a hospitable environment, to take care of leading practice, to take care of the space, these things, the practicalities involved will change. But I certainly hope that if anything, the spirit involved in it will be enhanced and perhaps feel more fresh and clear. Right now, the people who lead the evening practice sessions, they do a little bit of plate spinning, keeping prior. They kind of get things. If nobody's here, they open things up and arrive early and make sure the tea is going and take care of the altar. Sit down, lead the practice. Perhaps greet people who are here early. Though we don't model our chores, our Dharma chores, exactly after the way it's done in the monastery, I often do think about how that's done. And one of the things that I think about is when there are major practice sessions where they're doing an extended practice session and people will come and sit and either just participate by listening or also read, that the monastery will, even with 200 or 300 people, the monastery will somehow come find the wherewithal to serve tea to everyone. And at the Kagyu Monlam, they not only serve tea to 12,000 people, which just is staggering, they also serve these Tibetan breads. I'm completely astounded to see that happen and see the intention of that. And I'm not suggesting that we make Tibetan bread every practice session and pass it out and have a small army of people making tea, but the hospitality and taking care of people, I think, is making sure that people feel welcome and sustained when they come. And the practical gesture of providing something to at least a cup of tea or something to drink. It's a very important gesture. The altar, the offerings that we have, the very first offering in the row there is water to drink. So, just as we offer to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas all the things that we would offer to a guest. So when we make the offerings, it's like we're inviting the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas to arrive, and we activate the space by saying, "Yeah, okay, you're coming, and here we are. We're making these offerings. We're creating this environment." So there's an element of activating the space and kind of keeping that going, keeping it clean. Then all these things I think they'll shift a little bit since the tea making place and where the altar is in the new place are different floor levels, different places. I think maybe it would be good if those become separate. Those people who might be inspired to do that might feel a little reticent to actually sit down and lead a practice session. So there's also a reason to allow somebody who can cultivate a sense of hospitality to take that on, and then the person who has the responsibility of actually leading the practice session, helping it unfold for people, they can concentrate more on just that aspect of holding the Dharma space. Those are a few intertwined thoughts, in part inspired by some email conversations and in part inspired by the arrival of the grasshopper bars that I was so looking forward to.
I was going to mention also, like at Sharvasti Abbey, with Tukum children, they have offering service prayer, and I know that was shared here in our community on that. And I was thinking also at different things that we might have on little cards or something, reminders to set our intention as we do different things to making a Dharma practice, and as you said, inviting the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas here, and really kind of framing it in that way so it becomes a part of what we do, because it's, at least for my mind, it's awful easy to forget and just do it by rote and kind of rush in and be distracted and all that. So if we had little cards of different kind of things that around that kind of focused on the service we're offering, that seems like something that can make it then more framed in setting our intention and then dedicating it afterwards to the benefit of all beings. One of the things that we might, just ideas to consider as we come to the new center, which has been a long while in the making.
20 years. I can make I can make an overt pitch for volunteers, people who might be interested in helping out in any one of these areas. So that it's actually important that we have more people engaged. And if some of these things become a little bit simplified, maybe it will make it kind of easier, more practical, and then I would hope also more fulfilling to be able to engage in that.
Mm-hmm. I know that at the Zen community of Oregon, they have a time that there are different service positions that you can take on, and you offer it for a period of time, like 6 months, and then switch, and you can switch different things and do that as well too. And so that's one of the ways they get different people involved and committed to actually being there. We haven't done anything like that particularly, but just had it kind of open-ended, and it might be interesting to just see what if that brings up a different energy, or you learn different things, and so we're more aware of different aspects, different ways to offer service in the community.
You and I need to talk.
Yeah.
It is, I think, an important part of Dharma practice overall to engage in service to the community as well as service outside. But it's the things that we do in the community activate the community, that makes it actually flourish. So that's a very important piece, and our personal engagement in that. It's actually hard to explain from my point of view, but I think I have a fair internal certainty that most of what's unfolded in my practice life has had more to do with sweeping and pounding nails and organizational engagement. That's actually the juice that has all the other things that have happened that you would say, oh, that's the spiritual thing. I think the juice behind it is actually all those other things in engagement. There is definitely something about investing life energy in practice and life energy in the Dharma that really it makes a big difference. I feel a little bit awkward talking about this because it's kind of like, and now please all sign up and do the work so I don't have to.
Well, I think you've been doing just a little bit of work for 3 countless eons. We appreciate your practice over a long period of time, and persistence and resiliency.
Remind me of your name.
Sarah.
Sarah.
Yeah, and I signed up on the volunteer list, and tea and altars is something I'm particularly drawn to. I actually did a bit of that at Shasta Abbey when I trained with the sacristy and teaching staff and stuff. So I'm very happy to make tea and arrange altars.
Good.
Yeah. I think your description of it as life energy is exactly it. It's I've been once in a while watching a show on Thursday nights called Think Like a Genius. It's actually organized by Stephen Hawking. It's amazing. And they do these big experiments. And one of the experiments I saw was how they're looking at how life forms in the whole universe, which is mostly on Earth. Right? Life forms on Earth. Why does life form on Earth? Certain pieces come together. And they were doing these various experiments with volunteers who don't have any science background, and they just do the experiment and things happen. And they found these, so they were given these little hexagonal bits with little magnets on them. They found they could put them together into various shapes and things. Oh, that's fascinating. They create forms, you know. But then they were looking at ways that they would do naturally. So they threw them up in a barrel and shook it so that it had continuous energy input. And they all, the forms took form all by themselves. So as you were speaking, that's the kind of thing that came to my mind, that when there's energy anywhere, something develops. Without the energy, it doesn't develop. It just sits there. So it's really, and it feels really good when you're part of that energy. Like you were saying, it fuels your own practice.
So you've been talking about the pyramid of generosity, and I've been thinking about the pyramid of discipline lately, and how is it used? I mean, I can see that word discipline be used so many different ways in the Western society, and so I'm wondering how that really relates to our practice.
If my memory serves me correctly, there are quite a few different ways that's translated or expressed.
I wondered.
An enthusiastic effort is one of them.
Oh,
Diligence is another, if I'm not mistaken. But that discipline, it's so funny. We have these words that are the best approximations, and they get used. But if you kind of just took an Insta poll and got, like, how many people are reminded of something kind of negative with the word discipline? Okay, all right. Well, it's a pretty good word, but so we have to be kind of careful about these things. But the enthusiastic effort or engagement. This really, it's, you said we were talking about generosity, but in a certain way we're also talking about this enthusiastic effort, the kind of the energy of that. Yeah. Very practical. Yes, go ahead.
I had something to add to that. Well, when you want somebody to do something, you have to make them want to do something, right? So it has to be a positive experience. So that also ties in with your discipline word that you were saying with, no. But yeah, I mean, you want to like make it a positive experience and enthusiastic experience. So the discipline sort of comes after that. So people want to continue doing things. You know?
It's true. We seem to want to continue our life in samsara.
Mm-hmm.
We're rather disciplined. We have enthusiastic effort when it comes to that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's then we get on to the paramita of wisdom, or discriminating wisdom, discernment. Just what to have, where to put our life energy, where to put that, and that. There are various ways that the enthusiasm arises, and it's both from a positive draw and also kind of a healthy fear of consequences. Actually, I don't want things to turn out in a certain way. I have some experience how things turn out when I engage in these kinds of activities. I don't want that. So, as much as I'd like to only concentrate on the, like, figure out how to make this so it works, so I'm just kind of happy to do it. Mm-hmm. There is an aspect of a practice that really has to do with confronting our own tendencies and looking at the consequences and having a healthy caution about about certain kinds of things. So those two things kind of come together. But if there wasn't a positive way out, it would just suck. So but that feeling that there is a positive alternative has to be kind of a real key to it. Not just, oh geez, I hope it doesn't get worse.
But even that is still a positive.
Yeah.
I mean, hope is very powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes when things are coming up and it's just very, very dark, sometimes hope is all you have. I mean, even if you've had like great spiritual experiences at that moment, what you have is just the hope that it'll pass.
Yeah.
You know, that, okay, there's a light at the end of the tunnel and I'm going to hold on to that for just a bit longer, and then you do, and then it does pass. Like it starts to ebb a bit, and eventually you're through it.
Somewhere right in there is the experience that that everyone here's experienced before. Just seeing how I'm trying to not go to the catch-all phrase, but I'm going to have to go to the catch-all phrase. Seeing how samsara just keeps the basic disappointment, and the basic like, for instance, seeing my own treadmill toward whatever it is I'm always driven toward, and seeing around me everyone driven to something, and seeing where all that just goes into waste and wrong thinking. I didn't want to say that. I don't want to say wrong anything, but just like it just goes like it sucks. Like you said, it just, and so you want a way out. And then like when you're really flat out, it's like this society we have here is just crazy. Then I want something else, and then there's some fire under it. There's some juice, and that's where discipline. I can find discipline much easier when I'm profoundly disappointed with samsara and the way I keep doing the same stupid things over and over again, and I end up, nowhere. And so, okay, sit down.
One of the things that's, I don't know how common it was in the past, or how common it is in different societies, but cynicism.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the possibilities that comes up when you say, "Oh, things are, it's all a mess. It's all a mess. It's always going to be a mess. Oh man, it'll never get any better." Oh. And that, I think, from a Dharma perspective, there's kind of a laziness in that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like, oh, I don't have to do anything. You see, it's a mess. What to do? I will just complain. The paramita of complaining.
The seventh paramita.
Whining.
Yeah.
If you were inspired, you might consider blooming where you're planted. I made that my aspiration and intention. I want to bloom where I'm planted and let go of my own suffering. And really notice what attitudes or patterns that I create make my mind unhappy, and then it end up making my connection with others diminished. And so really those kind of things, that keeps me inspired to go forward with this. And then as Michael has encouraged, I think, us to let go of expectations of results from your practice, but just keep practicing. And over time, the fruit will ripen, and we will receive the result of our regular practice. Just like in going to the gym or cultivating a healthier lifestyle or something, very gradually you may see shifts in how you feel and your emotional state and all that, but it doesn't happen immediately. It's just like little drops of water that gradually get added into a pitcher and very, very imperceptibly fill it up. And I think that's what we're sort of doing here, is just putting little small drops in and letting go of the effort. Just like in January 1st, just about, I cut my roses down really low and then put some fertilizer on it and waited, and then it rained, and then it rained, and I waited some more, and then all at once, March, April, poof, there's hundreds of rose blossoms on them. It's been amazing to see, but it didn't happen all at once. I had to prepare the ground, plant the seed, do all I needed to do, and then have patience and wait for nature and other causes and conditions to support it, and poof, it's like abundant beyond comprehension. And I think that that's what sort of happens with Dharma practice, although it's hard to wait for the poof. We want the poof now. Give me this stuff now. I don't want to have to cut the stupid roses, and I don't want to have to put on the fertilizer. And for God's sake, I don't want to have to wait, for heaven's sake. No waiting on aisle 6. And I think that that's how our Dharma practice gets kind of discombobulated.
Certainly one piece of it. It's interesting, the balance between putting energy into practice with some sense of purpose, and that there is that with a sense of purpose there is some vigor and engagement, but not to be looking for immediate payoff.
Or any payoff.
Well, I don't know that it's that's sort of theoretically possible,
Yeah.
but I think we actually do have to tune our minds a little in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, that's too abstract a starting point. The place where it's critically important in our life. I'm speaking more just in our life in general. It's critically important to have that outlook in the instant of meditation. In that moment, then you just follow the instructions. If you follow the instructions and hope for roses at the same time, you can't do the two at the same time. You're hoping for roses, not following the instructions. So it's just simple. It's kind of simple. It's not a kind of studious self-abnegation and you bad Bill, you want good stuff, bad. It's just simple. When your mind is wandered and you bring it back and you just do that, then things unfold from there. When it's settled and you're there with your experience, you might actually you might sort of feel the texture of a kind of crazy thought that seems somewhat familiar. You might feel the texture of it arise, and then that might give you some ability to notice how things are unfolding in your experience, what's unfolding in your mind. It might give you the opportunity to not be sort of instinctually kind of impulsive, follow kind of instinct and habit patterns. But to do that, again, you have to not be kind of hoping for something else when you do that. You really have to be there for the show of how that arises. It reminds me a little bit of what one of the things Lama Drupchu said on Wednesday night when he was talking about calm abiding. Calm abiding is not designed to make you feel good. It's like, oh dear. It's like, all right, let's see how we're going to package that one. Friends and neighbors, please come. We have a practice that's going to make you feel like crap. It's not like that, actually. But the notion that you're expecting to feel good is a form of hoping for roses that gets in the way of actually seeing what can open up. If it's just calm abiding, if it's just training the attention, you can kind of keep score on that. But when and that was what Lama Drupchu was talking about. It's like that's the path of power. That's kind of power. You get more powerful when you can really be kind of more laser-like, more focused, more clear. But the path of freedom, the path of liberation, requires actually the insight to grow. And so, to the extent we're kind of building up a skill with calm abiding, the fruit actually comes in those moments when we actually can relax with our experience and be with it in a very clear, direct way, and to see how it's unfolding and see into its nature. And that in that part, definitely, there's nothing to do. To quote Bokar Rinpoche, this was in 1996. He was here for the Mahamudra seminar we had at Lewis and Clark, about 200 people, and he was giving instructions. He'd been giving instructions and various things, and he's talking about the progression of practice and getting up to. He was saying, like we've been talking, you engage in calm abiding, and that provides a foundation of stable attention. You then start to explore things with insight. But then Mahamudra, and he was speaking in Tibetan, but then he said in English in the middle of it, nothing to do. Nothing to do. And you're like, and then Mahamudra translated that as nothing to do. And that's, I think everyone here is sophisticated enough to know that this is not an instruction to keep indulging in all the bad habits that you have, and not to bother making any effort in practice. It's not that kind of nothing to do. It's that moment, the moment of experience, of meeting experience directly, where there's nothing to do. And in that, you have to give up that looking for roses. You have to give that up. But he said, in the meantime, because that's so hard, and it's so fleeting, because the first thing, if we have any little taste of success with it, we want to call it a rose, and then hope for more. Smack! That was the end of that. So he says, along the way, then there's lots to do. Lots to do. We talked about all the foundation practices and all the different good things to do, training the mind, everything else.
That's where the discipline comes in.
Yeah, back to discipline.
That's what that's for.
Every seminar, he would have like a different little catchphrase or something that was, and every year it was something different. And in 1996 it was nothing to do. One year it was something, Nordrup translated it as something like, just leave it alone. And then the French all were like, Ricochet, Nordrup said, and then they're trying to process kind of a thing, just leave it alone. Like, don't screw around with it, just leave it be. They're trying to translate that in kind of literally into French and kind of then reverse engineer why it didn't come out that way with the French translation. No, you just stop, everybody stop. That's not what it was about.
How are all of the 3-year retreatants doing and everything going on out there? And the visitors, what will happen in this next period of time for all the folks out there?
In the 3-year retreat, I don't have any special news about anybody in particular, which I always take to be good news. It's all quiet on the retreat front, and that's generally a really good sign. But right at the moment, I do know that they're shifting into the final lap, so to speak. They're shifting into the completion stage practices, and that's actually why Lama Drupchu was here, because there's some of those practices that he's kept more active, and so they thought they would take advantage of that. So yeah, the completion stage practices.
I have a mundane question, since there's nothing else going on. Sometimes when I meditate, one instruction I was given was that, like, to keep your eyes open. And I don't force this at all. But I do find that when I'm in a state of concentration, or something more than just my normal scattered, that I don't have to blink as much. But the interesting thing that happens is that, like things after a while will get, like, gray, like, it's not as bright. Like, to the point where, like, it's hard to see anything. And, to me, so it's kind of like, I can feel really, relaxed, but is that like a state that I shouldn't want to go to? It doesn't really translate very well into like clear and aware. It's like clear and aware, like deep within my body, as opposed to like aware of the room.
Mm-hmm. Different things can happen in practice. That's one of them. If you're really absorbed, when the awareness is really absorbed, kind of relaxed within a particular object, you may notice something that you don't notice otherwise, which is something like that you're not seeing in the same way. So
it's like the senses shutting down.
that's what it feels like. That's what it feels like. But it's actually the absorption of the awareness in the object. It's not like your eyes have stopped working.
Sounds like a good thing, maybe.
It's okay. It's not something to sort of expressly cultivate or hope for. Um, yeah, I think when we daydream, we don't. Some things like that happen as well.
Mhm.
We don't notice that we're not actually hearing somebody talking to us. And we're not like aware, oh, I'm not hearing things. I'm not actually present with the immediate environment of what I'm seeing. But because daydreaming is so unconscious, it's not aware, so it doesn't actually notice some of those same kinds of things. But it's a shift in attention. One of the reasons that the instruction to meditate with the eyes open, one of the reasons behind that is so that when we're out and about in life, that we can actually engage in subtle practices without feeling like, oh, our practice is disturbed by the fact that I'm seeing stuff. Because if you're really going to do nothing to do, you don't shut out what you see. You don't shut out what you hear. But the deep stabilization of shamatha involves things like what you brought up, though.
Yeah, and I'll even intentionally focus on exactly how things look. That's it. And I'll just focus on it being like unclear. I mean, yeah, I'll tell you later. Yeah.
How many people have tried using thought itself as an object of meditation?
Define thought.
What's that?
Define thought, like deliberate or like cluster writing?
Either way, deliberate or just the flow of thought.
Oh yeah.
It's difficult to do without falling into the content of thought. But in it's kind of a similar vein to practicing with your eyes open, so that you can practice in the midst of what's going on. Cultivating the ability to be very familiar, sort of like with what thought is, you could say, just to, that's kind of a starting point to encapsulate them, but to be just really clear what it is. Oh, this is what this thing, this is thinking. When I say the word thinking, this is. rest my attention on that. If you're just starting out with that, or I think a general advice with that is do it for so short that you don't think you're actually really doing it. Because it takes a little head of steam. It's sort of like in order to get lost in a thought, you kind of need the subject and object and verb. You need the parts of the story to start to get organized, and you go, oh, I know where this one's going. Then you're off in whatever the fantasy or thought or plan or memory is. You're just wrapped up in it. But doing it very briefly, it's possible to kind of short circuit that. So it's more just like touch, touch. And then it's possible to kind of relax more with it. But it's very easy for that practice to become just simply noodling around in idle internal gossip.
In order to see it come up at all, and have any have a chance of touching it lightly, usually I have to have not a whole lot going on. So I have to have a certain amount of stability in shamatha.
Mm-hmm.
I have to have one of those good days for that to happen.
Yeah. But if you understand the principle,
Mm.
the brevity of it can allow you kind of to
Mm-hmm.
just pop into it.
Mm-hmm.
It's the hope for stabilizing something. This is another hoping for roses thing.
Mm.
Wanting something to stabilize, wanting an experience to stabilize. It kind of violates the Buddhist principles of thermodynamics. The law of Buddhist thermodynamics is everything is impermanent. Even the notion of a thing to be impermanent is too much of a
Mhm.
too much meddling.
So could that be actually what you just said? Maybe I wonder. It could be a tool itself for establishing shamatha to begin with. Just see the things come up and right from the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
Even instead of beginning with breath or body or anything else, it could simply be,
Mm-hmm.
let's see these things come up and just not let them go anywhere. Not let them not go anywhere. Just
So let them do whatever they're doing.
let it. What did he say?
Let them do whatever they're doing.
No, what did he say? What
Nothing
did
to
book
do.
on
Oh, nothing
Nothing
to
to do.
nothing to do.
And what was the second year? What did he say? Leave it.
Leave it
something.
alone.
Leave it alone. There you go. That's it. Leave it alone.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that in leaving it alone, I just know from my own experience there are certain streams of thoughts that are triggered by external events. And when I follow them, my mind becomes very unhappy. Then there's certain other streams of thoughts or events that happen, and my mind becomes very happy and wants to grasp onto it. So I notice either grasping or aversion, and certain thoughts pop up, and I listen and follow the story. And so if I can, and I've learned, at least especially for me, Eckhart Tolle calls it the pain body, or the frustrated negative thoughts that get into a story about why I hate whatever. You know, and that if I'm able to notice that those thoughts stream coming up, if I don't engage in it, but just watch it float by and say, aha, you come to visit again. You know, and just notice, and it floats away, and then then I wonder, it's like a cloud floating by, well, where'd you go? And so that's one of the pieces I've noticed helpful bringing all this process here. I'm not rejecting it, but I've noticed, because I've noticed from experience when I follow certain ones, it does certain things in my life, in my mind. Through mindfulness, just noticing that. And then not making me wrong for whatever it is popping up, because I don't seem to be able to control what pops up, kind of automatic.
Yeah. It's like the starting gun.
Yeah.
Where did it come from? You can't tell. You never see it. But then you're off to the races one way or another.
My sister, who is also my senior in the Dharma, shared with me this really great video the other day of somebody had done this little presentation where they were teaching a class, and they held up like a glass of water, it was like a half full or something like that, and they asked the students in the class, well, how much do you think the water in this cup weighs? And went around the room, people gave various different answers in ounces or whatever, and he said, the weight of the glass of the water doesn't matter. What matters is how long I hold on to it. If I hold on to it for a minute, the glass back on the table doesn't really matter. It has no real effect. But if I were to hold this glass, my arm out for an hour, it would hurt my arm would start to shake, it would really weigh on me. He said, that's exactly what like our thoughts and emotions are like when we hold on to like our negative emotions and things that arise for us. Is that the longer we hold on to it, the heavier it gets. And the quicker we just put it down, it becomes much easier.
The process that you mentioned, Bob, of noticing how the stories turn out, that's an essential aspect of practice, and cultivating those stories that turn out better than the other ones is really crucial. And without doing that, the mean time between sitting down to practice actually grows and grows to the point where it doesn't happen. When we actually notice that, then it supports our practice. It supports moments of awareness. But in the practice of insight, you actually have to abandon the notion that choosing which threads to follow or not. And really you have to kind of treat them as though they actually don't intrinsically have power to control what's going on. Because the belief in the reality is a more fundamental thing. And to see, you said like clouds from the sky. There are many metaphors like writing in water or the trace of a bird in the sky. To really not be trapped by that. Yeah. But we generally have to use that capacity for discernment all the time. So it's very important.
Because I was an experimenter, I notice when I fall into certain thoughts that make my mind really unhappy, and I repeat those thoughts and really practice them, I end up being quite miserable. Discovered that, and you really do get quite miserable and hate everything. And I said, well, that's the result of that path. And then I said, well, so don't be too, isn't that interesting? And then when I follow the other path, letting it go and saying, oh, it came up again. And I don't follow it, but just allow it to come up and acknowledge it and be present with it. And then it tends to go if I don't reinforce it. And I notice that also the same thing can happen with the pleasant thoughts. I really think I want something. Ooh, I must have this. And then I'm thwarted in getting it. Then my mind says, no, we'll figure out some other way to get it. And then I go through all this and I say, well, you're just as unhappy now as you were then as other stuff. And so it's like, it's interesting how my mind chews on a bone like a dog and does that kind of thing. And I'm trying to just watch the dog and watch the bone and hear all the growling going on. So it's very interesting.
And now has come the time to dedicate this so that we may all find what to do when there's something to do and occasionally take advantage of the possibility of nothing to do.
By
This virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state.
Thank you all.
Thank you.